Okay, hello everyone. Rabbi Jacobson here, and I want to wish you all, as we prepare the last few days before the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which honors and celebrates, commemorates 3,327 years since the revelation at Sinai, which arguably, maybe not even arguably, maybe the most significant event in history, not just for Jews, but for the entire world, because you can attribute essentially modern civilization, the Bill of Rights, freedom, democracy, and all the principles that we cherish so much in our world today to Sinai, where the Jewish people received the mandate, the divine mandate of how to live their lives, a blueprint of how to live ethically, morally, a life of virtue, justice, charity. So long before these principles became popular on a global scale, 3,327 years ago, a relatively small group of people, relative to the general population, embraced these ideals. And it took a while, but in time, it essentially changed the world. So the Jewish people embraced these ideals. Approximately more than a little more than 1,000 years later, Christianity was born, which has now 2.5 billion Christians on the earth, who all value and consider Moses and the Bible as being their first book. And then 6 centuries later came the birth of Islam, which turned the pagan Arab world into the religion called Islam, also based on the Torah and the Bible, which now is 1.7 billion people, Muslims. So basically 2.5 billion Christians and 1.7 billion Muslims makes for more than around 3/4 of the world. And all influenced by this event that happened at Sinai 3,327 years ago. Now this is not my own theory. If you read books like, there's a great book called On Two Wings by Michael Novak, a scholar, and other such books where they trace and explain how even the founding fathers of this country, this is the first republic, the first democratic republic on earth was the United States, its principles, which were completely revolutionary at the time, the principles of the rights, Bill of Rights, to use the words of the Declaration of Independence, that all people, all men are created equal, and have inalienable rights endowed upon them from their Creator, which include the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech, the freedom to pursue happiness. These principles that we take for granted today simply were not a given 400 years ago, 500 years ago. The world was controlled by monarchs, by despots, by dictators, whether it was by the church or by the different kings throughout Europe and so on, or even in the East, the Far East, controlled by individuals who controlled the destiny of millions of people under their rule. And no one had rights. There was no such thing, period. That's why it was called the American Revolution, similar to the French Revolution, which, with all its downside, but one thing it established, which till this day stands, is a concept that today we take for granted, that every human being has rights. And nobody can take away those rights from you. And you can prosecute if they try to, based on race, color, religion, and so on. The guarantors of freedom of speech and all the other freedoms that the Bill of Rights guarantees us. So this is not to be taken lightly. Just because we take it for granted, it doesn't mean this was a given throughout history. It simply wasn't. And it could be attributed back to the Mount Sinai, where the first revolution took place, where these ideals were documented and delivered formally from God to the people. In truth is, even before Sinai, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they already embraced these ideals, but then it was not, as the Talmud puts it, there was not mitzvah v'oisa. They were not commanded to do so. This was on their own initiative. They discovered God, they discovered virtue, and they embraced it on their own, which in a way was like preparing for Sinai. But it would be their children and their grandchildren who then would go through the oppression of Egypt and finally would stand at Mount Sinai. This coming Shabbos will be, this coming Sunday, I should say, will be exact anniversary of the time that they, two opinions in the Talmud, whether it was the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan, But regardless, it's approximately either Sunday or Monday when they stood at Sinai and they formally embraced and built a relationship. Actually, Sinai is compared to a marriage. Yom Chasanos is Matan Torah. It's compared to a marriage between heaven and earth, a marriage between matter and spirit, a marriage between the Jewish people and God, and in effect, basically between the human race and God, which was a marriage of commitment toward each other. That God said, I will give you life, I'll give you sustenance, but you have something to do in return. You have to transform the world that I have given you into a noble place, a spiritual home, a divine home for me, which would later be captured a little while later, almost a year later, in the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the sanctuary that was built in the spirit of what they received at Mount Sinai. So the Mishkan was essentially a consummation of Sinai, which was building an actual home, an environment, a physical environment from physical objects and material objects that would be in line with what what God wanted of the human race. So Shavuos is no small holiday in that sense. It's essentially really the mission. It's when we revisit and we renew our contract with God in our personal mission in life and our collective mission. So it's definitely quite a significant day to discuss. So we'll consider this a pre-Shavuos workshop, and they called it, Can You Be a Revolutionary? One of the questions that you see quite often people ask, even though it may not be the biggest issue most of us are struggling with, if someone says, can I be a revolutionary? I have bigger problems than that, most people will say, because I have to deal with anxiety, I have to deal with depression, I have to deal with all kinds of other distractions, temptations that control my life. But as I'll try to make the case that sometimes we have to distinguish between symptoms and the root of something. There's an expression, I remember when my son came home from school, and I still remember the day how excited he was. He was not even 10 years old. When your child gets excited, you also get excited. And he heard a line, he shared it with me. Today he doesn't even remember, but I remember. The line was, you were born an original, don't become a copy. Anyone who's been blessed with children, and anyone who's been blessed to see children, know that children have their unique novelty about them. Every child comes to earth is like a fresh gift. All possibilities are there. No child is born depressed, unless there's some type of aberration. And so on. Every child is born with a certain exuberance, a sense of adventure, a sense of free abandon, and left to its own resources, without adults imposing their own negative energy, a child should continue to grow into being a very optimistic, confident, hopeful adult. As we shall discuss, it's the parents, it's the adults around the child that ultimately begin to break and somewhat, you can even say, deteriorate the free spirit of a child. When you look at a child, it's a clean slate. Nothing in the child's life is there to inhibit it because it doesn't have experiences yet. If anything, it only has spiritual experiences, because 9 months in its mother's womb is a very pure world, even on a physical level, completely protected. Did not have to care for itself. It ate what a mother ate. It was protected in every possible way in the embryonic fluids that surrounded it, that engulfed it. And then, especially if you go from a Talmudic point of view, the Torah was also taught the entire Torah in its mother's womb. So also spiritually nurtured and nourished. So when the child comes into this world, it comes in with a very powerful resources. And as we see children, they explore. Everything is an adventure for them. Everything is exciting. Everything is fresh. And in many ways, they help the parents and those that see them also refresh themselves. So in that context, a child is an original. Every child is an original. When do we begin to become copies? When first our parents, and then our educators, and then our friends, and then the society as a whole begins to so-called impose its standards on us. The demand for conformity, to belong, to fit in. And slowly, we begin to lose our voice. We begin to lose the confidence in our own voice, the courage to pursue your own destiny. If you grew up in a home where parents were insecure and were constantly second-guessing themselves and you, clearly a child like that is going to find difficulty to be secure and confident in its choices. It'll always be second-guessing itself. Grow up in a home where you're reassured, where you're nurtured, where your self-confidence is continuously cultivated, then you can take on the challenges in life. So very dramatic moments in the early years of our formative years when we're shaped into what we will become as adults. But let's talk the best case scenario. Best case scenario is every one of us is an original. From a Torah point of view, that's exactly what it is. But I can share with you that many of my years of experience in dealing with people, this lies at the heart, in my opinion, of so many other maladies and problems that we suffer from. Now, most of us complain when we feel pain. We don't complain about the root of problem. We complain when there's symptoms. You know, no one's going to go to a dentist, even if your teeth are deteriorating. As long as you don't feel pain, it doesn't bother you. Because nobody's looking to go to doctors. No one's looking for intervention unless you feel some discomfort. But that doesn't mean there's no problem. It just means you're not aware of it. The root of many, many problems is a person's self-confidence and sense of security. Even though they may sound a little abstract, but it's not abstract because that's the heart and foundation of all your decisions and choices or lack thereof. Now, of course, this will most be expressed in the area of relationships, personal relationships. You could have many people be successful in business, in social life, in partying, in doing a lot of other things that are entertaining, because there's no necessarily a real emotional involvement. You can get away with those things without necessarily investing your soul. But when it comes to relationships, when you need to have love, commitment, you're vulnerable. You need someone, they need you. You feel you're not there to just, you can't control it all. That's when the best and the worst comes out of us. So that's why relationships will always directly be the first symptom of a problematic soul, a soul that is not confident or secure in itself. It'll express itself in relationships with others, because that's where it manifests. As I said, you could find people who are very successful in many areas, but in the emotional area, as soon as they're not in complete control, or they are subject to unexpected twists and turns, and they're not in control of the destiny, they're vulnerable, which is essentially really love, the celebration of vulnerability. I've shared this with many people. When they hear that, many people freeze up. Celebrating to be vulnerable, most people see vulnerability as a curse, as a crime almost, as you're open to being hurt. But only insecure people are afraid of vulnerability, because when they were vulnerable, they were hurt. People who've learned that you can be vulnerable and be still a strong human being, not afraid of vulnerability. And true love, where you let go and you trust, requires a measure of vulnerability. There's no way to have it without that element. Trust and vulnerability go hand in hand. To say, I will only have love in my life that gives me every time exactly what I want, and I'm in control of it, that's not love, that's control. So bottom line is, we're all born originals, and then what happens is we become something that we were not really meant to be. We become something that others expect of us. Sometimes we're just running and chasing our tails because so many people are expecting different things. We become pleasers to our parents, to others. We want to have their accolades, their acceptance. We want to some way compensate for our own inadequacy. So what happens is you lose touch with the unique voice, the unique soul that you are. So when you ask a person a question, do you think you're a revolutionary? Do you think you're a pioneer? Many people shy away from that. They say, that's not for me. I'm not saying everybody, a lot of people say, it's not for me. Some people are pioneers, I'm not. I'm fine to just have a 9-to-5 job, tell me what to do, and I'll do it. I want to build a secure home and family. I'm fine, I don't need to chart a new course. I don't need to do something different. Many people have that reaction. I've tested this. And you wonder to yourself, is it really true? Or is their own fear speaking? Maybe they don't want to go there. Maybe they're fear of failure. Maybe just more comfortable just to be where you are. You know, listen, the known evil is always better than the unknown evil. So if I'm comfortable, even though I'm not making any big waves and I'm not doing anything that's unique, you know, it may be more comfortable for people to be that way than to explore new horizons, new vistas. But if it's not true, but if the truth is that you are unique and you're just not ready to embrace it, then what does that say? How sad is it that you live an entire life You never really spread your wings and never discovered your voice and never really had the courage and confidence to express yourself and be what you were sent to this earth to be. So that's on one level. And on a personal level, ultimately, even though you may be comfortable, and I say you, I don't mean necessarily anyone in this room or watching, I mean everybody else on earth, the rest of the population, on another level, there's no way that you're really happy. It means that what you do is you live what Thoreau called the life of quiet desperation. It's undercover. So you manage. Some of the saddest things you hear from people is they say, I was once idealistic, I had dreams, I thought I would find such beautiful things in my life. And as the years rolled on, I became more and more resigned. Every year brought more disappointments. I lowered my expectations. Now I'm happy if I just go by a day and I don't feel miserable at the end of the day. So once with dreams, now it's just, if I could just come out even from the morning to night, I'm fine. People say that. And people say that, that's very sad to hear, because you're writing yourself off. I understand why it happens to many of us, because life does break us, and many times and disappointments, and we just don't we give up. And we feel weak, and we are human beings after all, we're not gods. So in a sense, we lose confidence in ourselves. It's like someone tries and tries, and how many times are we going to try again? But the truth, however, is that you're really giving up on your potential that is not your own. It's what God gave you. So if Matan Torah, Shavuot teaches us not just the mandate, it's also the vote of confidence that you have something unique to bring to this world. And you are a revolutionary, absolutely. That doesn't mean, revolution doesn't always mean the most dramatic sense. Not everybody has to go and change billions of people. But in your own way, in the path that you travel on in your life, in the sphere of influence, the people you know, your family, the places you will travel, the work you do, in all those areas, everything that comes your way, all the divine providence that will lead you wherever it will lead you, you have something, a unique footprint to make in your life. It's as simple as that. And there's no ifs or buts. There's no exceptions, because if there were an exception, God wouldn't send you to this earth. If God wanted to have another clone, He wouldn't need you. Send someone else. What does He need you for? If you're here, that alone dictates, from a Torah point of view, that you have something to do that no one else can accomplish, that no one else but you can accomplish. Now, many people, when they hear that the first time, some of us feel very good to hear that. Some of us feel very almost foreboding. It's almost too much for us, because then suddenly I have to review my whole life and my expectations of myself. But that's exactly what the Torah is. Now, just for contrast purposes, it could be in a secular world, especially if you go with an approach that we are essentially some type of evolved bacteria, and our lives therefore don't have any cosmic significance. You could argue, who cares? I just read, when you wake up in the morning, you get out of bed, you kill around a few million bacteria right there and then. Who really considers that a tragedy? So if we are insignificant life forms that just evolved into human beings, and our egos that feel that we're important is just some illusion, then yeah, based on that type of philosophy, you could say that you're negligible, unnecessary, and indispensable. However, the Torah categorically rejects that, because the foundation of life, from a Torah point of view, even before Torah mitzvahs actually, comes something even before that. Because when you open up the Torah, it doesn't begin with saying God gave the Torah to the people. That will take 26 generations. Adam and Eve did not formally receive any mandate. They received some commandments, but they did not receive the Torah. It comes later. I'll explain why soon. Because if the Torah is the purpose of all of existence, like Bereshit, B'shvil HaTorah, B'shvil, that God should give the Torah. Created existence for a purpose. Like giving the human race life, earth, existence. Where's the operator's manual? We have to wait 26 generations to get the operator's manual? It's a very basic question asked. But regardless, I'll get to that, back to that, as I said in a moment. The bottom line is Adam and Eve. So the first thing you read in the Torah is not actually about the Torah and mitzvahs. Actually, Rashi, the first Rashi in the Torah, asked the question, since the whole Torah is to give mitzvahs, why does it begin with Bereshit, the creation? And he gives the answer because one day someone will ever say that Jews stole Israel from others, which is uncannily exactly what's being argued today. And Rashi wrote this over 1,000 years ago. So we know the Torah says God created earth, and he gave earth to whom he wished. He gave all the countries to other nations, and Israel he gave to his nation. But on a deeper level, we begin with the creation because the first thing we have to do is establish the significance of the human being. Because if we're not significant, then anything we are told to do will also not be significant. So the first and most important statement is, the human being was created in the divine image and put on earth with a purpose and a design. Once you know that, then everything else follows. If you don't have that inside of you, then all the commands and all the mitzvahs and all the Torah will be meaningless, because you'll say, who says I'm meaningful? If I'm not significant, my choices are not significant. So why are you telling me to do this or do that? But once you know that you are put here and you have something revolutionary, something unique to contribute, then your actions matter, and your words matter, and your thoughts matter, because how you will behave will change the destiny of existence. And then comes the Torah and says, okay, now that we've established your significance, your indispensability, then here's the blueprint, here's the mandate that you shall follow. Now, why wasn't it given right in the beginning? So one basic reason is a very interesting one, because we're in a partnership with God. This isn't just a one-way street that God gives us a machine and here's the operator's manual, follow it. It's important that we embrace it and be equal partners. And therefore, the human race had to earn its right to receive this operator's manual, to receive its blueprint. And once it earned the right, that's when God gave it. So then you had a man like Abraham, who rose from a pagan home and a pagan world and embraced the concept of a God. And once he embraced God, he embraced the tzedakah and mishpat, the justice and virtue. Once he embraced it, and then his children embraced it, and 7 generations embraced it, then God said, okay, now that you're ready, I will now meet you halfway. It's like, think of it like it's what says in some of the holy books. It says that the Til Matan Torah was like the education of children in a collective sense. And Matan Torah, Shavuos, was the bar mitzvah. So when a child is born, you can't expect the child to live up to standards because the child is not yet aware. So what you need to do is train, discipline the child, and then it comes of age, when it begins the maturity process. It enters into puberty and begins turning into an adult slowly. That's when a child, a girl at 12 and a boy at 13, can embrace their obligations. And that's exactly what a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah is. Similarly here, Til Matan Torah, the first 26 generations, which is 13 times 2, like bar mitzvah 13 times 2, the first 26 generations was like the childhood of history, of the collective childhood of the human race, where people were left to their, okay, you figure it out. And trained, educated, and come to embrace the ideas on their own. And then God, on Matan Torah, at Sinai, formalized this contract, this relationship. Which is why it says in the Medrash, in Mechilta, it says that when the Jews left Egypt, and we know they left Egypt 49 days later, which we're now counting down the last days, at the 50th day they would receive the Torah. So it was a direct process that began with leaving Egypt. So when they left Egypt, the Jews said to God, the Medrash tells us, oh please, now that you've taken us out and freed us and we've become a free people, tell us what you want from us. What is it you expect from us? Seems like a logical question. And God's response is very interesting. He says, Kabul malchusei v'achar kach kabul gzeresei. Before you accept my requests, my orders, my commands, my laws, my guidelines, first accept malchusei, my sovereignty. First accept me before you accept what I ask of you. Think about it. It's a very profound and simple foundation of every relationship. Two people can love each other, get married, and the relationship is based on mutual benefits. You do this, and I'll do this. You prepare the meals, I'll pay the bills. You take out the garbage, I'll turn on the light bulbs. Just giving you an example. The contract that we make with our spouses. So it's a relationship that's based on, like similar to a contract business relationship. Here's what you do, here's what I do. And as long as we're doing it for each other, it's a fair agreement. Everyone's benefited, everyone's giving, everyone's taking, everyone's getting things, and everyone's giving. But do you really accept your spouse just for who they are? Not for what they do for you. Not for the needs that they fill. That's a whole different story. What God was saying to the Jews was, I don't want just to have a relationship with you. You do this and I do that, and we have this. I want you to accept me. Because once I know you accept me in my entirety, I know that automatically you'll do what I ask you to do. Because that's what love is about. It's a commitment. It's based on the acceptance. In business, you don't need that. In a business contract, no, you don't have to necessarily accept. You have to respect. Obviously, you can't be completely disregard the partner you have. But no one asks you have to accept the entirety of the people and their personality. No, you have to accept your obligations, live up to them, be ethical about it, and follow the agreement. But when it comes to a true relationship is accepting the other party as an entirety, for all their strengths and their weaknesses. Not only when things are going well and you're getting what you need. I mean, you see many relationships, unfortunately, as soon as one party is not getting what it needs, they're out. My wife is too old. I found somebody better. God forbid one person has to deal with infirmity. Someone gets old, the classic story, the beautiful story, touching story. No one should know of it, of the woman who got Alzheimer's. And Alzheimer's is one of those killer diseases. The memory starts going, your personality, everything changes. And it's very difficult for spouses and children because they're seeing the person they loved, the person who was completely in control, is suddenly losing themselves. The humiliation involved. It's a very, very traumatic experience for everyone involved. There's a story about the guy who used to come. After a while, his wife, simply could no longer function, so she had to be in a home. And to the point she forgot everyone. She forgot who they were, her children, even her spouse. Which, of course, is one of the saddest things to see. What's going on in the unconscious, we don't know, but consciously. But the husband was a loyal husband, would come every day to visit his wife. And finally, one nurse said to him, Mr. So-and-so, why do you keep coming? She doesn't recognize you anymore. And his answer was, yes, but I recognize her. She doesn't know who you are, but I know who she is. See, this is Malkabel Malchusay. At that point, he's not getting what he got earlier in his life from his spouse. Doesn't even get recognition, and not at her fault. But there's nothing. So no one should ever know this, but when you see that, it's an unbelievable testimony to the commitment people have for each other. This can be also parents and children, how easily children just simply reject their parents because they're too much of a burden, etc., etc. Obviously, we have to consult with professionals and make sure that our people who will get into those situations are taken care of. But never because you suddenly are uncomfortable. And what about when you were a little baby and your mother was there for you even when it wasn't so comfortable for her and had to stay up all night, etc., etc. That's what commitment is. Any healthy parent, you'll ask them and say, your child suddenly wakes up middle of the night crying or hurt or because of cold. And it may affect your work tomorrow. You may be not even able to go to work or you're exhausted. You'll say, enough is enough. The quota has been met. I've been up enough nights with my child. No more. No one ever says such a thing because it's not a business contract. Because you accept your child in its entirety. There's a full, complete, unconditional love. I know, unfortunately, there are parents that don't think that way. But that's their problem. That's not because it's healthy. It's because they're not healthy, to be very blunt. So that was what God was saying to the Jewish people. He was saying, accept me. And then we'll talk about the details. You accept me, I'm comfortable. Then we'll work out the rest. Which is also why in Judaism, tshuva is such a powerful tool. What's tshuva? One person has betrayed another. One spouse has betrayed the other. And yet we say there's always hope to repair. If it was based on a type of mutual benefits, at some point someone breaches the contract's over. They may even say in the contract, if there's a breach of contract, blah, it's over. But when it comes, if you accepted the entirety of another person, so even if they breach something, intentionally or unintentionally, the relationship is not over, because the relationship is not based purely on what you do or what you don't do. It's based on a acceptance of each other. So what happened at Sinai was a real marriage. It's called chasanase, yem chasanase, zeh matan Torah. It's called a marriage, and a marriage is not just a do's and don'ts. The 10 Commandments come afterwards. But the first thing is Anochi Hashem Elokecha, the first of the 10 Commandments. You accept me. and God accepts the people. It's a mutual acceptance. And what does it really spell out? If you want to spell it out in real psychological terminology, it's what I was saying earlier. That not just accept, but I need you. There's something that you have to contribute that's revolutionary, unique, that only you can contribute, no one but you. So that's the real statement of Sinai on a personal level. Now, let's bring this back to home, to our lives. So why then is it so difficult for us to get there? So I'll go back to what I said earlier, because there's too much turbulence and too many voices have distorted the message. If, when we were born as originals, we were that originality, that uniqueness that you have, your voice, your song, was embraced and validated again and again and again, then of course you'd grow up feeling very unique, not necessarily arrogant, in a humble way, feeling I am a special person. God created me with a special role in a divine image. I'm significant, I'm necessary, I'm indispensable. And therefore, all your choices and your life matters, now and forever. However, if we don't get that message, and so anything that was original about us and everything that's unique about us suddenly goes undercover, because when you behave, like I remember, more than once, people telling me, every time I tried to do something, I was a little creative, my father would yell at me, who do you think you are? Picasso? Who do you think you are? This musician? Imagine hearing that from a parent again and again and again. And children don't need much, they just need encouragement. What do you think, the child suddenly thinks they're Picasso, they're some type of master? Child's simply doing something. You see a child comes home, a little homework, they made a little art, they did something. It doesn't matter whether it looks beautiful or not. It's the validation of their effort, not what's the product. A father like that should be, I don't want to say whipped, because I don't believe in whipping, but a father like that is destructive. It's worse than any form of abuse in a way. Can't say any form, there's maybe worse forms of abuse, but it's abusive to say this to a child, because you're invalidating the child's effort and their enjoyment and their excitement about something. So what do you think? Only when you think a child like that is going to grow up and become excited about doing something big? When even a small little thing wasn't even acknowledged. And unfortunately, this is what parents often do. Maybe even unwillingly. They're busy, they're distracted. But it's like a crime. It's a crime and a violation of a child's exuberance and excitement to throw cold water on it. To do so to an adult is also inappropriate. To hurt somebody or to just dismiss something they've accomplished. But an adult hopefully has enough resilience, has enough defenses. But a child has no defenses. If a parent's not going to acknowledge a child, who will? So we're talking here about the most precious commodity we have is our children. And what happens is, slowly, such a type of dismissal, and what do you think it ends up doing? It ends up eroding a child's inner confidence, inner courage, and doesn't try. Children will stop trying at some point to succeed because they've been told so many times that they're failures. Or who do they think they are? Blah, 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 and all the other stuff. So it's not that the children don't have it. It's not that we don't have it in us. It's that somebody got in the way. Somewhere, something impeded our ability to just grow. Imagine a tree. It begins as a sapling. So it sprouts. It begins to blossom. Everything beautiful. So the sky's the limit. It grows, there's nowhere to stop it from growing. So it spreads its wings, it spreads its branches, and turns into a beautiful, magnificent tree. But let's imagine for a moment that at some early stage, when it was still just a sapling, something came and just built a wall right there. You put it like concrete. So the tree growing, it can't spread this way because it's concrete. And now on this side is concrete. So where does it go? It starts getting cramped, has to force its way up. It'll grow because that's the nature of the beast. But it has nowhere to go. Because other forces are not letting it be itself. That's the analogy. So if you look at a psyche of a human being as an adult, in many cases you have to look at not just what your psyche is like, but what caused it to be the way it is. What forces forced you to conform, to bend out of shape, to fit into someone else's mold, to do all the other things that become the forces that impose themselves on our beings, on our confidence, and so on. It's tremendous forces that affect us, unfortunately, in a negative way. So if you think of it that way, if you are a parent, every day just imagine that. You have before you new saplings coming out of the earth, And it's up to you to even give them that breathing room, give them that freedom, or unfortunately stick some of your own shtick, some of your own garbage crap, I would say, that impede and in some way distort the growth of this child. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that we have it within us to be originals, but for some reason it's gone undercover due to life's experiences. And don't think and never underestimate the forces. I mentioned parents. Let's move on now to education and to school. When teachers and schools also demand certain conformity, you don't fit in, you're criticized, you're laughed at. And then society itself. I know we all like to think we're tough adults and we can deal with everything. I don't believe that's true at all. Everybody's affected by coworkers, by employers, by employees, by clients, by bosses, and so on, who there's a certain silent social order that you're expected to fit into. And if you don't, you will become either a full-out pariah or in some ways ostracized and dismissed. So most of us don't want to take the risk. How many people are ready to go and just follow their own voice? Even if you have that voice, how many people will protest if they see an injustice when they know that it may cost them their job? No. Recently I met with a fellow who made a lot of money in the finance world in New York. And he, top of the world. And then came his day, like every wheel turns, right? One day you're on top, one day you're on the bottom. And when his wheel decided to take a shift from top downward, and his life started falling apart for different reasons, of course, that's when you have a wake-up call and you suddenly, I got to do something about it. Most people, when they're riding high, they really care, And then he's reviewing his life. And how many people, he says, have I screwed in order for me to climb the corporate ladder? I had friends, we were loyal friends in school and so on. But then, especially, I guess it's not just in the world of finance, in many very high-octane professions, bosses play people against each other. There's the competition. So people are really, it's like a rat race where people are literally, you can do things to your own friends that you think in the name of whatever it is, you're doing something right. But in truth, you're simply stepping on someone else for you to grow. So of course, in such an environment, we don't find, our voices really are completely lost. But the seductive power of glory, of influence, of money, and all that comes with that, blinds us. And when we're blinded, you can rest assured that your inner voice that was once that child in you is gone. I wouldn't say gone, is undercover. So of course a person like that is not going to be very prone or open to creating some revolution in this world. They're not even confident with themselves. They're doing whatever it takes to succeed. And whatever the rules are, that's what you do. And you break a few as well, but you fit into what is expected. This force, I don't even know if you can measure how much of that does have impact on our lives. The expectations, the impressions, the appearance that we want to have. We come to a party, we come to an event, when we meet people, what are you projecting like? What do you consider how do you define success? Is very much defined by how other people define success. That's why you find very few, and words of Robert Frost, that travel on the road less traveled. Because by nature, it's far easier to go on the road that has been traveled on. Now, we all love to say we're out-of-the-box people, and I do my own thing, and I'm an original, and I'm a free spirit. Yeah, it's nice words. If everybody was out of the box, we wouldn't have boxes, right? So, not that simple. It's actually quite a minority that really are that way. And it's not even somebody who may have come up with some great idea in science or technology or some other innovation. They also may be just like everybody else, but they were lucky. But it's harder to define, but there are those people that beat to their own drum. And those are people, I would venture to say, more often than not, somewhere in life they've built up an inner confidence in their own voice. Sometimes it comes from very healthy childhood where parents reinforced and validated that soul, that voice within you. And sometimes actually it comes the opposite way around. From so much pain in life that you've come to fight for, like when you have nothing to lose idea, that you've come to a point where you have nothing to lose. You don't really care about other people's approval because you've already been hurt. So you come to a point where, from the other extreme, you come to realize, I've got to find myself because satisfying other people, being a pleaser, hasn't really worked for me. So it can come from both directions. It can come from extreme light, or it can come from extreme darkness. But in both instances, you'll find that's where revolutionaries are born. They're born either from deep pain or from very healthy environments. Some people argue even that pain is even a greater catalyst because when it's a healthy environment, you can often take it for granted. But I didn't mean just a healthy environment. I meant also parents, not just to spoil and just validate you, but also in the process encourage you to take on challenges. So when we say to ourselves, people say the line, you know what, I'm not a pioneer, that's for other people, I'm just a regular bread and butter type of guy, 9 to 5, that's it. I would venture to say most people say that not because that's the case, because it's more comfortable to say it. It's the easier way. You don't have to challenge yourself. You don't have to transcend yourself. You don't have to reach places, that are unknowns. Unknowns are always somewhat frightening. But when a person has that inner sense of confidence, you can navigate anywhere. And there are ways to test this. I often ask the question to people, I say, so when you go to a party, do you gravitate to the people you know or to the people you don't know? It's a pretty big indicator of things. I'm not saying it's the only indicator. I'm not saying it's a foolproof test. But many people say I gravitate to the people that I know. Why would I go to people I don't know when there are people that I know? So I'm more comfortable. We have to break the ice. But that tells you something. People who often go to meet others, well, there could be another reason. You lost all your friends, so you don't feel that you don't want to meet anybody that you know. Or they know your jokes already, etc. So, but on a healthy level, a person who has confidence is like a swimmer, a good swimmer. A good swimmer is not someone that can swim against the current and fight challenges. A good swimmer is a navigator. You know how to navigate. That's far greater. Someone asked you, you had two choices. God offers you two choices. One, that your life should have no challenges, no impediments, no obstacles, just a free ride, so to speak. Or, second option is that life should bring you whatever it brings you, but you should know that you always have the confidence and the strength to deal with any challenge that comes your way. So, spontaneously and knee-jerk, immature response would usually be, just give me a life of no problems, like many children say. I wish I had no problem. I wish I had another father. I want another mother. You just blurt out. When you have a problem, you say, I'm envious of that person who has no problems. When you get a little older and you understand things, and I don't mean older only chronologically, I also mean emotionally and psychologically, you come to realize that it's a far greater blessing because it's unrealistic to expect and it would be ridiculous to say that life, I should have no challenges. You want to know is that I should be able to swim in whatever waters come my way. Because then, besides the fact that you can deal with any challenge, it's also an inner confidence. If you never have a challenge, you never know what you're really capable of. The second blessing is that whatever comes your way, you can handle. And then, of course, you ask that hopefully what comes my way should not be too challenging or too difficult. But that's really what we want to know. And that's why the Bible begins, the Torah begins, as I said, not with the giving of the Torah, but number one is that you are created in the divine image. And by virtue of the divine, if God means anything, it means that you are godlike and therefore indispensable and have all the divine powers you need to face any challenge that will come your way in your life. But to go a step further, that you have something unique to contribute that only you can contribute. Now, the founders of the United States, the founding fathers, in the Declaration of Independence, only took one little piece of that. They said that by the virtue of the Creator, we're all endowed with inalienable rights. But if you take it further, it's not just rights. It's also the fact that anything that we have the ability and the vote of confidence in us to able to accomplish anything that comes our way, we're able to deal with. This doesn't always mean that you deal with it the way you like, the way you'd like it to be. Sometimes it means avoiding something, to have the wisdom to know what to avoid and what to embrace. to know when to fold them and when to hold them, as they say. But and the second thing is that you have that absolute significance, that you have something unique to contribute. So to regain that type of awareness and confidence after living in a world like ours, where parents, school educators, and society itself all conspire, unintentionally or intentionally, to turn us into robots that become conformists and herd mentality. And if any of you have read 1984, George Orwell writes, 1984 came and went a long time ago, but when he wrote it in the 20s, he was writing about where the communism was going, was a world of what we called, I forgot already all the terms that he used there, but basically it was all about mind control.
Big Brother.
Big Brother's watching you, mind control. And there, independence and individuality is considered to be an illness, a curse. And anyone that exercises it is like they try to lobotomize and torture. There's no such thing as individuality, because in the future of the world, there's too many people, the populations are too great, and therefore to keep everyone aligned, you have to make sure everybody fits into a program. Everybody's like a robot. It's quite a chilling account. And when you think about it, even though it may not be that extent that it is today, that our world today is not to that extent. Some people say it's even worse. But that's what it comes down to. And the things that you consider to be freedoms end up becoming the greatest enslavers of them all. Take your mobile phone, for example. That's like a tool of emancipation, right? You can speak to anyone, anytime, anywhere. As I like to say, you can get access to anything, anytime, anywhere. It doesn't get freer than that. So we would think that most people today in our day and age should be free human beings. Well, are we really free? Do we our relationships are thriving? We're like healthier spirits. We feel more courage. We have a better, healthier intimacy. We know how to love better. All the real signs of individuality and independence don't come expressed. So why is that? Because gadgets are gadgets. As they say with computers, they used to say it from the beginning, they still say it. Junk in, junk out. Garbage in, out. If you have junk in your life, your tools are also going to basically process junk quicker. So you have a search of, you can find things quicker, you can find junk quicker. But if you have quality inside of you, then of course, these tools will make the quality come out better. Like what they say about nichnas yain yotze sod. That means when someone drinks wine, so the wine enters, the secrets come out. They say a shikar, a drunk is, afus is afen lung is afen zung. This rhymes also in English. What's on your lung is on your tongue. Now, depends what the secrets are. If it's a fool and he begins to drink, what do you think is going to happen? The secrets will come pouring out, but you're going to hear foolishness, more of it than you'd usually hear. And if it's a wise person who has a lot inside, there's a lot of quality will come out. That's exactly what it comes down to. The internet and our mobile smartphones and this gadget and that gadget and texting and the whole thing is simply a neutral machine. It's a number cruncher. If the numbers you put into it, the data you put into it is intelligent, it will speed up the process. And if it's not, it will also speed it up. So bottom line is, don't be deceived by external freedoms. Just because we can move around, like 500 years ago, a few hundred years ago, people born and died in the same town, they didn't even know who lived 100 miles away. It was little travel. And if you had to travel, it would be on a camel, or on a donkey, or on a horse, and that would be it. How far can you reach? And if you had to send mail to someone, you did not get a receipt so quickly. It was far, far cry from the world of email. It was entirely, you sent something and you never even know if it arrived. It could have arrived, who knows what. Like the message in the bottle idea. That was that world. So you'd think, okay, that was a world that had no mobility. Today, we can travel. In 24 hours, you can be in Australia. Thousands and thousands of miles away. Yeah, but I know people who have billions of frequent flyer miles and they haven't moved an inch in their entire life, spiritually and emotionally. They just fly fast. It's like what they say is that the people who know more and more about less and less. So we know a lot. There's a website I saw that's called Useless Knowledge or Useless Information, one of the two. It's actually a very interesting website. But it's all useless. But it's intriguing stuff. But that's what it's called. It's an interesting website, useless information. See, that's the world in which we live. We have this leisure. And then there are people, which I've seen in my life. I remember sitting Shabbos in shul when I was a kid, and I saw certain Hasidim sitting under a talis, under the prayer garb, the prayer shawl, for 5-6 hours praying on Shabbos. And they didn't move an inch, but they moved millions of miles spiritually. So you could sit with someone who is not moving, but you sing a song, and their spirits, they're transported to another time and place. And you could sit with another person who's traveling as a jet setter, and they don't know how to move an inch, spiritually, emotionally. They don't budge from their obstinate positions, and so on. So what's a free person? A free person is one who knows how to travel with their mind and their heart and their soul. Not just physically knows how to go from here to there. Now obviously you want to have the best of both worlds. You want to have physical freedom, not be in a physical prison. But much more importantly is to have spiritual freedom. And spiritual freedom means that you're not bound by other people's opinions of you. And your choices are not made because others will or will not approve of you. Now we all are social animals. The Rambam says, Adam Medini, every person is a social creature. We cannot survive without approval. We cannot survive without acceptance. That's why there's the concept of community. But the question is to what extent? Of course we need that. We need a family unit. We need people who love us. We need people who support us, especially when we're younger. But the question is the extent. And that's why Hillel's statement is so valuable, because it's the balance. Im ein ani li mili, he always starts with that side, which means if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? No community can be you, can replace you. And then you know at the same time, there's a second half. If you're only for yourself, you're not just an island. What am I if I'm only for myself? But the second half is complementing the first half. He's not coming to state the second half as replacing the individuality. Once you know your role, your unique role, and your indispensable role, then, as a matter of fact, that will encourage you to coexist and embrace and be complemented by another. You'll always see this. People are very good at what they do and they're confident. They have no problem working with someone else who's very good at what they do. As a matter of fact, they look for those. They seek out such partners, because then you get a lot more done. But someone who doesn't know who they are, what do you think will happen? They'll conflict with everybody, because they never know who's taking. They're not sure if someone's not taking away part of their turf. As the Kotzker Rebbe told that guy that came to complaining in Kotsk, someone opened up a store that he felt was a competition to his store. So he came to the Kotzker Rebbe, Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, and said to him, I want you to tell this person to close down. He's taking away my parnasa, my income. Hasagas Gvul. Hasagas Gvul means breaching or crossing a boundary, competitive boundary, which is a law in the Torah, but there are conditions to this law. So the Kotzker Rebbe said to him, you ever see when a horse goes to drink water at a pool or a lake of water, what does it do before it starts drinking? What does it do? It starts stamping its feet. Why? Why is it so angry and so agitated? It says because the Kotzker Rebbe answered his own rhetorical question, because when the horse goes over to the water, is about to go down to drink, he sees another horse. It's a reflection of himself, of course. So he starts stamping his feet to chase away the other horses coming to drink up his water. And what happens at the end, the Kotzker Rebbe says? He comes to realize there's enough water for both horses. That was his response about the competition. So obviously was, be secure with what you have. Don't worry about it. You don't have to constantly, you're not going to be less because someone else has. You don't have to be wrong for me to be right. So here's the challenge. The challenge is living in a world that is continuously exerting pressure on us to not allow ourselves to be me, myself, and couple that with our education system and our parents. And I'm not talking about the healthy community, the imanila atzmi ma'ani, that I need others. I'm talking about the inanili mili was never developed, meaning the individuality. So then, of course, it's going to be extremely difficult to discover the revolutionary within yourself, because you don't even have confidence in it. Encourage, even if you were to identify it, you start saying, how am I going to even exercise that? How am I going to actualize it? Suddenly I'll appear one day and everybody's going to laugh. Oh, this guy thinks he's some unique, look who thinks he's important. Look who thinks he has something unique to contribute. So the tragedy, of course, is that we're all born originals, and had we been left to our own recourse with a nurturing environment, as I said, the sapling, the tree would have just branched out, spread its wings, and beautiful. But we're growing up with all kinds of cement and concrete and all kinds of walls and fences around us, trying to, trying to fence us in. So what happens to our growth? It gets impeded. We're afraid to express ourselves. We're afraid to spread our wings. But all is not lost, because the revolutionary spirit within you has not died. It's just gone undercover. And so we come to Shavuos, we come to Matan Torah, we renew that dimension. Interesting thing, when the Jews stood at Mount Sinai, there were millions of them there. 600,000 is the official number, but that's of a certain age, 20 to 60 males. And the recent Exodus movie, whatever it's called, Moses, what is it called? They use the word 600,000. I guess they got it from their consultants. But regardless, there was a lot of people there. In Hebrew, when you speak to a group of people, you don't speak the same way as you speak to an individual. Like when I say you, I can say you to a million people, to one person. Because the word you in English is both singular and plural. But in Hebrew, the word you for the singular and the word you for Lashon Rabim, Lashon Yochid is not the same. You say L'cha or Loch to a woman. L'cha is to an individual. Lachem is to a group. You add the plural. So the Ten Commandments, which was said to all the people, should have said, Anochi Hashem Elokeichem. I am your God, you're as in a group to all of you. But it says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, as if you would be speaking to one individual. So ask the Medrash, why is that the case? And its answer is fascinating. Talk about individuality. Because every person standing at Sinai heard the voice only as if they were the only one there. They did not hear themselves part of a group. Nobody spoke to them as a group. It wasn't like, okay, you guys, let's all do this. It wasn't that way. It was you. Bishvili nivra elam. Similar to what the Mishnah says. That's why a human being was created not as part of a herd, like the other animals, or vegetables, or other parts of creation, but as an individual. Why? Why as an individual? Because chayav adam, because a person is obligated, not just optional, obligated to say that the entire world was created because of me. That's not out of arrogance, as it continues. And when you save a life, it's like saving a universe. And when you, God forbid, hurt a life, it's like hurting a universe. It's about responsibility. This has nothing to do with anything, because you have something unique. You are right now here, in this place, in this time. That's all that matters. And you're responsible to take care of what you have to take care of. To say it's someone else's problem, no, why are you here? Because you have to do something about it. This doesn't mean you can't go for help. It doesn't mean you have to employ other people who can help a given situation, obviously, experts and so on. But there is no such thing as, oh, this is not my issue. There's no such thing as I am negligible. So when they stood at Mount Sinai, they were being told, this is your mandate, your Lashon Yachid. And the fact there's another few million people standing near you, so what? It's your message, right? When you hear, for example, a song being played, even if there's a lot of people around you, and there's of course a certain herd mentality there too, but a true song touches you. You close your eyes as if no one else is there. Because if it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't resonate, then you just look around, what should be my reaction? You look around, so should I be happy or not happy? And you ask your friends, and they say, well, let me ask my friend. And everybody's asking, blind leading the blind, and they say, the consensus is we should be happy. And then someone says, no, we shouldn't. So suddenly the consensus changes. Now, many of us run our lives that way to some extent, and even though our pride doesn't always let us feel that, doesn't allow us always to feel that we're just following the herd, but many of our major choices are that way, and the Torah tells us that at Sinai every person heard it alone. Just like Adam and Eve were alone in the Garden of Eden, every person standing at Sinai was alone with God, and they heard that in a singular, not in a plural. Again, that doesn't mean that there isn't a role to be played, a synergy and strength we get in numbers and strength that community provides us. But that strength is only to complement and to enhance the individual, not to annihilate the individual, as it is in any given situation. The individuality, the harmony, comes from the diversity, not from the cloning of everything is the same color and shape and form. So, bottom line is that each of you have your revolutionary inside of you, waiting to be released. And that's your mission in life, is to discover what it is. This doesn't mean you have to suddenly disrupt your whole life and suddenly announce, listen, I'm dropping everything because it's all part of my conformity, and let me go and start a new life. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting it all starts from within. It's in your heart. It's not the external behavior. Many people, as a matter of fact, behave like revolutionaries, and all they are is running for their lives. They have to prove something. A true revolutionary is not someone that has to just make a statement. It's an internal decision that I'm going to find my divine calling, why God put me on this earth. I'm going to find it in my life and in my home and family and my work and the things I'm doing. I'm going to infuse with that type of spirit. That's what the way to go. It's not just dropping everything you're doing. This doesn't mean, this is not an argument against routines and against good habits and so on. It's, however, not to become a product, a victim of circumstances and a victim of your habit, a creature of habit. It's meant to realize that what really drives you is not your patterns, but it's some inner force that's unique. So you could have, let's just take an example, Jewish prayer. People ask the question very often. It's one thing when you study Torah. So Torah is an intellectual process. So we all use our minds. We understand ideas with our own unique way. Okay. But we have to study the same doctrine, the same laws. And each one understands. When it comes to prayer, prayer is Ezu Aveda Shabalev, Zui Tefillah. Prayer is service of the heart. You're crying out to your Father in heaven, your God, and asking for your needs to be met, which is actually the mitzvah, the real mitzvah of Torah. Prayer is to pray for your needs. Then later, the rabbis and the sages developed a whole bunch of prayers, which is more than just needs. It's also praise and other things that become part of a bigger package and so on. But prayer essentially is emotional expression. So the question is often asked, I've been asked this question many times, why can't I just pray my own words? If I had to go to my father or mother and ask them for something, why do I have to read from a book? I say, here, I want this, I want that. I just open my heart and I say, I need health, parnasa, livelihood, a shidduch, soulmate. I have other needs, I have anxiety, and you just cry to your parent. Why suddenly it comes to prayer, we have to fit ourselves into words, maybe beautiful words, Shema, this prayer, that prayer, that prayer. And every day the same thing, and more than once a day, same words. At some point it's like very robotic. So it's an excellent question, right? So first of all, it's important to note that in prayer, there's also sections where you can say actually whatever you like, whatever language you like. But more importantly, even the prayer that seems to be so redundant, the truth is it's not at all that way. Let's take music, for example. If you saw someone playing musical notes always stay the same of every song. And they're following the musical notes. Is that of conformity or is that freedom? The answer is, it depends how they're playing. If they're playing by rote, mechanically, then it's going to sound that way. But you could have the same person play the same notes and it comes alive in an unbelievable way. Why? Because it's not just the sounds, it's the way you play the sounds. It's the spirit within them. It's the passion. It's the energy, the tempo, etc., etc. So the real prayer is, how should it be done? No Shema should ever be said the same way. Even 3, 4, 5 times a day that we say it, every time should mean something else. Same words. But what is the word echad, which is the main focus? Hear, O Israel, God is one. The word one has many, many meanings in different moments. You yourself can have a meaning of oneness. Today means one thing, integration in your life, and another day may mean something else. So it's not just the word is like the musical note, but the passion, the intention, the kavanah, and the soul of the word is very different. If you don't allow yourself to succumb to routines, lip service, which everyone does, or many people do. So why do we need to have these exact words? Well, it's the same reason that like musical notes. Once they're written, of course you could play by ear, but these written notes have a certain power to them. They have history behind them. When King David asked God, Yehi l'rotzen imrei fi, may it be your will, imrei fi, that the words that came out of my mouth, the supplications and the prayers that he said in the Psalms and Tehillim to God, which was about him pouring out his heart to God. He asked God he made a request. He said, God, may my words, the words that I spent my life pouring out to you, may these words become the words that throughout generations people will use when they speak to you and they cry out. And God considered the request and granted it. So he essentially infused King David's words with a power that they would become the musical notes for every tear and every cry and every laugh and every request we would ever make. That's not because we're fitting into the words. On the contrary, the words are like shortcuts, like musical notes that help us get to a place but that we could not get on our own. But at the end of the day, and as I always say it, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, it's most important is to pray in a way that you are expressing yourself. And some people who do not know Hebrew well and so on, in Yom Kippur it says, the Alter Rebbe writes in his Shulchan Aruch, that better to say one prayer with intention than to say them all without. So the point is to find those prayers that speak to you and let it communicate, let it become a tool. And if you need to say it in English or another language, so be it. The point here is the message. And the bottom line is, therefore, that it's not about fitting in, it's on the contrary, it's understanding the spirit within it. So it's not about suddenly saying revolutionary means, a unique revolutionary means that everybody's doing whatever they like. People are walking down the street and you're going to walk through the road. I'm a revolutionary. That's not necessarily the sign of a rebel. That may be the sign of an idiot. Or sign of someone just wants to make a statement. Fine. You want to make a statement, make a statement. That's not the point. You could have two people walking down the same street, but they're walking completely differently. One is walking with inner confidence and knows where they want to go, and the other person is a lost soul and is just walking because everyone else is walking there. So in other words, it does not mean, just like they say about paranoia doesn't mean, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean no one wants to get me. You know that one? So the same thing here. Just because you're doing something different doesn't mean you're a revolutionary, and just because you're doing something the same, it doesn't mean you're a conformist. It depends what's going on within. It depends what's really driving you. And this is not about points. It's not like saying, oh, you know what, guys, I've become a revolutionary. You walk around with a sign or a bumper sticker, hey, I'm different, Difference is something that comes internally. What I'm discussing here is obviously what's your engine that drives your life? And how will it be a force in transforming every experience? Because that's what it comes down to. The real test of revolution is not how many different things you do. It's, do you leave your mark on something or does it leave its mark on you? That's the key difference. Are you influencing or being influenced? And that's far, far more profound than just somebody doing something different to be different. It means that you are, wherever you go, whatever touch, anything you touch, every person you meet is changed because of you. Because you have something to give that's unique, and you allow yourself to actualize it in every interaction. That's a true revolutionary. Wherever they walk, this person walks. Whoever they talk to, whatever interaction they will have will be different. Because their unique energy will change that situation. And when you don't access that inner revolutionary inside of you, then what's happening wherever you go, usually you'll be influenced. You definitely won't make the mark. If you don't make a mark, it usually makes a mark on you. That's usually how it works. Even though it may not be so obvious. But in this world that we live in, it's either you're influencing or being influenced. It's very hard to be neither of the two. Even if we feel we're like on the sidelines, like the guy that said, I used to think I'm indecisive, now I'm not so sure. Indecisiveness is also a decision. It's the decision of, what they say, the greatest risk of all is not taking any risk. So what Matan Torah ultimately teaches is that each of us have a singular, unique, indispensable voice and force inside of us that through life, most cases life has forced it undercover, forced us to lose confidence in ourselves and not allow that inner uniqueness to emerge, and therefore shapes and in many ways impedes our own growth. So this doesn't mean it's complete extreme in the absolute sense. I'm not suggesting that people become conformist. It doesn't mean 100%. You could be 90% conformist, and once in a while that voice pops up. But Judaism and Torah and Shavuos and Matan Torah teaches that it should be 90% of you should be the unique voice. That you're not just a product of others. You're not just an expression of others. You are unique. You came to this earth to do something that not your parents and not your grandparents and no one but you can accomplish. That's why you're here. I would challenge anyone to say that they believe in God and they don't believe in the statement I just made, to me is tantamount to someone saying they don't believe in God. Because it's God that sent you here. So if you question your uniqueness, you're basically questioning whether you're really here for a purpose, which is questioning God's plan. Because to suggest that God sent you here just to play the role that someone else is playing, what do you need two of the same? To use the expression from the Talmud, God did not create anything that is extra. It's not nothing more and nothing less. So every individual on this earth has something to contribute that no one else can contribute. King David, when he challenged that premise, when he studied the world and nature and so on, and said, I figured out the role of every creature on earth, except two things. One was the spider. What was the second one? The chulda? I don't remember, not sure. But the spider. So he said he doesn't understand the role of a spider. It's interesting. I mean, this itself is a study. How did he figure out everything else? He figured out how they play. So God said to him, the spider, okay, I'll show you. So when he's escaping from King Saul, Shaul HaMelech, and he had nowhere to run, there was only a cave. So he ran into the cave. He hoped they wouldn't go in there, which was pretty wishful thinking. So God miraculously sent the spider. The spider wove a web, I should say. I was going to say webbed a weave. Wove a web. So we know when there's a web in a certain area, nobody walked through there. That's what webs are. They're usually a sign of cobwebs where no one goes. So when the soldiers went by, they realized there's a web there. So suddenly he realized this spider that he thought was insignificant, unnecessary, saved his life. Of course, it's a lesson in life, and I'm sure it's more deeper than just King David suddenly didn't realize that a spider has value. Probably there's a deeper message in it. Just like you hear the story in the Gemara, in the Talmud, where one of the Hamarayim was walking and he saw an unseemly person, a person very ugly. He said, Kama mukhur, look how ugly you are. I mean, which itself is pretty shocking. How would the sage say something like that to a person? Even if you're thinking it, you don't have to say it. But the Talmud tells it to us. And of course, for the main reason, because the man responded. He said, Lech le'uman sha'asani. Go to the craftsman. Go to the one who shaped me. Teaching us what? That God shaped us, and we have no right to be able to determine just because you don't like something looks the way. Who asked you? You're not the creator. And looks are not everything. Everything has its value. Like when we say, Hillel says, have a mitalmidav shel Aaron. We say in the Pirkei Avos, in the Ethics of the Fathers, which we study and read between Passover and Shavuos, and some continue reading it through the summer months till Rosh Hashanah. So the first chapter, Hillel says, you shall be from the students of Aaron. Oyeves habrius u'mekarven l'Torah. So the question is, what's Oyeves habrius? It means to love the creatures. So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, chapter 32, Lamed Beis, Lev, or love, chapter about Avos Yisrael, talks and says that even if someone doesn't seem to have any other quality, just the mere fact they're Bria, they're God's creature, is enough reason to love them. Obviously, they could also have other qualities, but it means that every human being has something unique. Ezu chacham halemin mikol adam. Who is the wise person, the one who learns something from everyone, which means everyone has something to teach and everyone has something to learn. There's no such thing as only givers and takers. Everyone gives, which is why there's a law in Judaism, charity, even a pauper, even an Evian has to give charity, relative to his capability, because it's the dignity of the human being that we all are able to give. And I can go on and on. This is fundamental principle in Jewish thought. And of course, Matan Torah is when it really was established. The dignity of the individual. And there's nothing that's extra. People talk about the human body, the miraculous human body. 75 trillion cells. Trillion, it's a pretty big number. And not one more than necessary, and not one less. Recently, they've been talking about junk DNA. There's a lot of parts of the DNA that seemingly are junk. But everyone understands, and they come to realize that there's no such thing as junk DNA. Even the junk DNA has a whole role to play. So I remember, so we know the body has many organs and limbs, and every one is necessary. Some obviously may be more necessary than others, more life-sustaining. They're vital organs, and not such vital, but they're all necessary for a healthy being. There are two parts of the body that still have not been discovered, what their role is. I think that one of them they've recently started to discover. It used to be three, by the way. When I was a child, it was tonsils, appendix, and wisdom teeth. I don't know if you know this piece of trivia. It's part of the useless information website, the useless knowledge, but it's not so useless. You could learn from it. So tonsils, whenever you had too many colds when you were a child, in the 50s, they decided to take your tonsils out. Today they discovered tonsils have certain power for your immunity, so they don't take them out so quickly. But in my days, I'm sure some of you know, you're all young people from the 70s and 80s and 90s. So, but all the middle-aged guys like me, most of us don't have our tonsils. I hope you don't think less of me because of it, but that's the case. I'm tonsilless. And I'm not going to go grow them back, Yeah. Now, maybe you don't even know what tonsils are. Okay. They're like two little things right down here. Okay. So there's the appendix, which now they're starting to discover that the appendix has some role, but they're not sure. And wisdom teeth, which usually grow in. Why they call it wisdom teeth? Because around 20 years old, they grow in all the way in the back of your mouth. They're usually mutations, and they have to be pulled out anyway. And they don't have any role, because no food goes all the way back there, so you don't need them anyway for chewing and so on and so forth. And if you pull them out, that doesn't mean you're going to lose your wisdom. So that we know. Now, any intelligent person is not going to say, oh, this is proof that we are all evolved by accident, because you see two parts of the body that are unnecessary. Because anyone intelligent knows they have billions of parts, or millions of parts, or whatever you want to call it, or thousands of parts, that all have a purpose. So if all of them have a purpose, the only one left is a spider, or wisdom teeth, or appendix, what does logic dictate? That we don't know yet what their role is. Now, if 90% of the body seemed unnecessary, then you could say, okay, so you need proof for something's necessity. But if 99% is necessary and 1% is not, or even less than 1%, of course we understand what the logic. Imreiku, as the Yerushalmi says, if you're empty, if you don't come up with an answer, mikem, imreiku mikemhu. It means the problem is your lack of knowledge, not that the thing is not. It's a little arrogant to say, because I don't understand, that's why it means something's wrong with it. Maybe you just don't know its role. And this is with simple things like the human body. I don't know if it's that simple. So the human race is exactly the same thing. If one Jew was not stood at Mount Sinai, one Jew was missing, the Medrash says the entire Torah could not have been given to the rest. Could say one out of millions. You're going to hold up the giving of the Torah because of one guy came late to Shul or whatever to Sinai? I understand there's no excuse because that's where they all were. There was nowhere to go. But nevertheless, because it's about the indispensable individuality. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, not Elokechem, as I said earlier. It's singular, Lashon Yachid, because everyone hears exactly what they need to hear, and in their unique way. So as we approach Shavuos and we enter this new year, 3,327 years, I like saying the number because it smacks from antiquity and longevity, and things are successful when they've been around so long. Like, in advertising, whenever they say, like, brewing beer since 1867, selling furniture for 70 years, everybody, feels, they've been in this business a long time. You can trust them. It's a family business, trial and error and all that. Even though, frankly, many of these businesses have changed hands many times. But it gives you that sense of continuity. So we could say we're in this business for 3,327 years. It's a pretty good track record. And you could challenge anyone. Does anyone have a longer one? And not to say there haven't been challenges, that we've been through much, but we're still standing. We've still been through all of this. So it's pretty powerful. It's like I hear people who do business with the Chinese, they say the Chinese don't respect anyone but Jews. And not because they're lovers of Jews per se, but because they respect longevity. They respect something that's been here for a long time. As his famous line of Chow and Lai, when Mao Zedong, who was the communist dictator of China, died in the early 70s, Chow and Lai became the new prime minister, and that's when China first opened up to the United States. President Nixon went to China. It was a whole thing. It was a new world. So the first time Western journalists had access to the Chinese, so they asked the Chinese prime minister, what does he think about the American and French revolutions? And his answer was classic. He said, it's too early to tell. Because China's around for a long time, 1,500 years. American Revolution is a few hundred years old. In the scheme of things, I remember a few years ago was the Lebanon War with Israel. And the Israeli generals were all saying within 6 days, 5 days, we'll have it all done. We're bombing the south of Lebanon then, Beirut and all that. And weeks dragged on, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And they said, you said few days. He says, what's 5 weeks in the scheme of a few thousand years, So I guess it's a joke, but it's also sad. The bottom line is, there's a power to continuity. And it's I say this with pride. It's great to feel part of something that has been here for a long time. And not because of its age, on the contrary. As I'm pointing out tonight, is that the focus here is that the Jews were able to do it not because they were just holding on to something everyone just did, conformity. It's because they knew how to infuse it. They did not just continue an old thing. It has many years. It's like singing a song for many years, but the song is always new. You always hear a new nuance, a new movement, a new spirit in it. That's our job, to make sure that it does not become stale and stagnant and static, because that's an anathema to human beings. Children hate most static things, stagnant things, because it's a taste of death. The only thing in the world that is static is death. Everything else in life is moving. Life is movement. Kol chai misneneya, as the Rambam says. It means everything alive is always moving. Even when you're asleep, you're moving. Your heart is beating, your body is moving. This concept of a couch potato that we have innovated is actually goes against the human nature, goes against nature altogether. Nothing just sits around. When someone says proudly, I did nothing today, that's like a tragedy. The old Jew was sitting on a bench, all depressed, ankle, and this French Schmedel comes over and says, so why are you so depressed? He says, my wife is very angry at me. She says, what's new? She's always angry at you. He said, no, today's really special. She said, why? He said, this morning when we woke up, she asked me, what are you going to do? She went to work and she asked me, what are you going to do? So I said, nothing. Okay, so she said, you said that yesterday. So I told her I wasn't finished. I wasn't finished doing nothing. So this mastering the art of doing nothing is this like new phenomenon. People tell me. I said, so what? I said, I've almost come to a point where I can do nothing. Like it's like an achievement. Well, Adam la'omer yavalad, a human being was created to produce. And there's something about human dignity when you don't produce, even though production takes work and it's exertion. Adam reitze b'kav shalei, a person prefers one measure that they earn on their own than 9 measures someone gives you as a gift. It's human nature, because we were created like the Creator. We are here to give and produce because we have what to give and produce. And the concept of just being a taker and just staying in the same place is not really consistent with human nature. It has to make a person ultimately miserable. Even though we all dream of the idea not needing to work, sleep all day, I could just hang around, whatever the word is, try it out. For the human spirit, it's not exactly a healthy thing to do. We shouldn't have to overwork. We shouldn't have to completely run and chase our tails and be completely consumed by all the daigas aparnasa, the worries, anxieties of making a living. But the spirit of a human being by nature, spirit, is like a flame. Ner Hashem nishmas adam, and a flame is always flickering, always moving, always growing, always alive. So as we come to Matan Torah, let us make the commitment to re-embrace a Torah that's not a stagnant, not yeshenim, not k'yudgema yeshena, as the Sifri Rashi says, not like some old hash, but kol yem chadoshim. It's a new. As the Talmud says, just like then they trembled and they were in awe, so too now. Which means that we recreate the passion, the energy, in a new way. Even though it may be technically the same Torah, the same words, but like music, as I said, it's all about what we infuse it with in our own spirit. And each of you, each of us, every one of us has something revolutionary to contribute. And ultimately, it's when you hang around with other revolutionaries that you build up that courage. You hang around with other herd mentality people, then you tend to gravitate toward that direction. So God should bless us all to use this 3,327th anniversary of being those revolutionaries. Discover your voice. Find a way not to necessarily disrupt everybody's life. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about finding a ways to infuse that whatever you touch, you leave your mark on it for the good. Whether it's a person, whether it's an experience, whether it's an interaction, whether it's even a physical thing. You walk down the street, we believe that every move we make can change the environment and anything we come in contact with. So everyone should have a very happy and celebrate Shavuos. This is, as I said, Shabbos goes right into the holiday, Sunday and Monday. And definitely encourage anyone who's to go, make sure at least to go in the morning to hear the 10 Commandments read the first day of Shavuos, that's on Sunday. I'll repeat what I heard from my Rebbe, who encouraged people to not just go themselves, but to bring their children, even newborns, based on the Medrash, based on the Gemara, the Mishnah, Asher Yoladate, one of the compliments given for one of the great sages was not any of his own virtues, but it was how beloved, how precious is the one gave birth to you, because when he was a little baby in a bassinet, he wasn't yet even able to understand, she would take him to the Beis Medrash, to the academy, to listen to the words of Torah. Because even though we may not know it, from the youngest of age, and even in the mother's womb, a child hears and sees everything. And it affects their unconscious, their subconscious, their superconscious. So, Matan Torah by Sinai, everybody was there. We recreate that, as the Midrash says, when we hear the commandments again. But as I said earlier, it's not just hearing by rote, it's hearing them a new way, with a new passion. And it's in everyone's hands here, wherever you'll be at the holiday. You have the choice to make that table come alive, or just do things again mechanically exactly as they were done last time. To make it come alive means to bring a new question, challenge, provocative. We don't have to wait for the Seder to be provocative. Some way to make for our children, for anyone at the table, a new type of experience. That's how you keep people excited. You don't keep them excited by just doing the same thing again and again. You can do the same custom, but you can do it in a new way. Be creative. That's how you bring the revolutionary outside of through yourself and in your children. You challenge them and you reward them to be creative, to be innovative, a new interpretation, a new look at it, a new challenging way to approach it. You know, always having a guest that maybe is somewhat challenging is also great, because guests force you to have to dig deeper and say something instead of just going into your own, through the motions. So these are things that we can control. These are not necessarily dramatic changes. This simply means paying attention and not just taking for granted that you're sitting around with your family. Actually doing something a little different, a little fresh, a little new. It doesn't have to be something that disturbs anyone, but it could be done in a way that just makes things more exciting and more passionate, and so on. So everyone have a very good holiday. We'll be here next Wednesday, which is after Shavuos, as we continue this journey. Philip, my good friend, musician, songwriter, and many years student of mine, gives his class tomorrow evening. Anybody wants more information, just contact our office. And as we come to the end of also the 49-day journey of the Omer, which I know many of you have been participating in through our emails and through app and through our the daily exercises and meditations. So feel gratified that you were able to get through this. Hopefully it was a true personality refinement, character development on each of our parts. But as someone called us recently and said, can they start the counting after Shavuos? So we said, absolutely. The refinement, they don't have to make a blessing. They can just go through Chesed, Shabbat Chesed. You can do it all year round and still have more work to do. But the 49-day period is coming to a close, and then we come to number 50, which is, of course, not counted that exactly. That is Shavuos. So thank you very much. It's been an honor as we enter this new Matan Torah experience. And we go into the 3,328th year, and we finally merit to have what says the consummation of the marriage, which is the Eris and the Nisuyin, with the coming of the total fusion of heaven and earth, with what we call the coming of Mashiach and the redemption, which was the beginning of it, began at Mount Sinai, when heaven and earth joined, and the conclusion will be when the entire earth will undergo its own spiritual revolution, a heightened state of spiritual awareness, as Maimonides says, a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, coming from Isaiah, that the primary preoccupation of people on earth will be not materialism as an end in itself, but as a stepping stone towards spiritual awareness. And that, again, is something each of us can begin doing right now. Everywhere we walk, every path we take, every move we make can be infused with your unique touch, your unique song and music. Thank you so much.